been the principal in over 10 successful startup companies in the past 15 years. He's past president of his local board of realtors and has held numerous SCR positions. This year, he's on the board of directors for RPAC and is also vice chair for the legislative group. Thanks for being with us today. And now we'll turn it over to Jerry Spearman. This is sponsored by REF. Thanks.
Good. I guess we're at afternoon. Want to talk a little bit about reassessment today. What I really would like to do, though, while we're doing this, is generate as many questions as possible, because there's a lot to cover in this, and I don't want to go ad nauseum and bore everybody with details that you may or may not be interested in. But what I want to do today is to give you an overview of how the property tax system works in South Carolina, problems and issues with it, and then also, how you can interact and possibly help in reforming our property tax system. So I'm going to go to our first slide here, and anytime you have a question, if you'll just type into your chat area questions you may have, and they'll forward them to me, and I'll try to answer them as we go. But feel free to type them at any time. You don't have to wait till we get to a new section or a new point. First, I want to go over what the reason for how property taxes work, and the reason for reassessment and equalization. Property taxes in South Carolina, as it pertains to real estate, cover commercial property, residential property, and investment property, as well as industrial property and agricultural property, and they're all taxed a little bit differently. Commercial property is taxed at one rate, and residential is taxed at another rate. When Act 388 came around, what it did is, for people whose primary residence in South Carolina is South Carolina, and that property was their home, it allowed the school portion of the millage rate to be taken out. So when you pay your property taxes on your home, you don't pay any money toward the schools. That burden shifted away from individual property owners and from primary residential properties to commercial property, industrial property, agricultural property, and investment type of property. At first, really no one noticed. The tax rates remained the same, and it really was not a big deal to anyone. But what has happened, over the last few years since Act 388 passed, is that those taxes have shot up pretty dramatically. And at the end, after we go through the overview, I'll show you a couple of examples how that happened and the effects on the individual taxpayer. So, anyways, your property tax is calculated by the market value of the property during the reassessment times the county millage rate plus the school millage rate. As I said, each different type of property pays a different percentage. Residential property is 4%, investment commercial property is 6%, and then you've got industrial and agricultural properties also at a different percent. And I'm not really going to cover that in scope this webinar. One thing I will say, however, is that industrial property, particularly big industries, which used to provide a lot of our tax base, now do not usually pay very much in property taxes. The counties have done fee in lieu agreements with most of those properties, and that is all kind of organized by the state. It's hard to find the information online about what that property pays in property taxes. For example, if you go to Charleston County's website and you try to find out what Alcoa is paying in property taxes, you're probably not going to want to be able to do that because that's all done by the state, and they'll just have a blank there. because of the fee in lieu of tax agreements. Not that they hide that information purposely, but it's very difficult to find that information. Let's talk about reassessment. A lot of counties are undergoing reassessment this year. Beaufort County, Anderson County, and there's probably a few others. Next year, Charleston County is supposed to go into reassessment. Horry County, Pickens County, and there's a whole list of them. The purpose of reassessment is property value equalization. A lot of times we think of the purpose of reassessment is to raise additional capital or tax dollars for the counties. That is really not the purpose. The purpose of reassessment is to equalize property values and to kind of put everybody on an equal playing field. In some states, this occurs every year. In South Carolina, it only occurs every 5 years. Also, counties can defer reassessment if the county council votes on it for up to a year. Somehow, in 2010 or 2009, Charleston County, using the home rule theory, was able to put off reassessment for 2 years, and they've actually did that quite to their advantage. They knew values were dropping, and they knew if they could delay reassessment that they could keep their tax base higher. Also, they were undergoing some changes in their computer system, and so they basically ignored state law, claimed home rule, and Mark Sanford, who was governor at the time, the big home rule supporter, didn't really do anything to enforce South Carolina law, and they actually put it off for 2 years. That's the only example I know of a county delaying reassessment 2 years. The reassessments are performed by the county assessor. They use a mass appraisal system, which, in my opinion, is not particularly accurate, but it does, at least to some extent, adjust property values up and down to put them, where, they probably closer to where they probably should be. The reassessment is limited in scope by Act 388. Counties cannot use reassessment in the year of the reassessment to bump taxes way up. They really, what they've done is they wait till the following year, because I know Spartanburg is going under reassessment this year, and even with the drop in real estate values, Spartanburg is actually claiming that there will be an overall increase in assessed values of properties, which I find a little bit hard to accept. That and Spartanburg realtors may disagree with me, but that the values in Spartanburg overall have gone up in the last 5 years. But that's at least what the assessor's office is claiming. Nevertheless, when you get your tax bill in Spartanburg, your value may go up or down a bit, but your overall the overall taxes the county take in should not go up. Now, in situations where property values have gone down, counties basically have decided and that they can raise millage rate in those years to offset the loss in tax value. And though I don't think the law specifically addressed that, and I'm not an attorney, but I've looked into this and I've talked with attorneys about this. There's nothing to say really that they can't bring the values back up to where they used to be, so they the overall tax amount they're taking in up to where it used to be. So essentially, that's what they're doing. So, for example, next year, if you're in Charleston County, and say you have a house on the Isle of Palms, and the value of your property has gone down, say by 30% since the last reassessment, you may find the value of the property decrease, but you'll probably see your tax bill be essentially the same. Now, what this does in certain counties is it creates a kind of untenable political situation because it is, in a lot of areas, the biggest drops in valuations have been in the second home market and the resort home market. And in those areas, the property values have gone down, but the counties don't want to raise, say, your average taxpayer's tax bill to basically support or subsidize somebody who's got a second home. So the assessors tend to overvalue those properties in those counties. I got a question here. Where can we go to find when our specific county will reassess client in the county? Usually the county assessor will publish that on his website. Not in every case. There is a schedule, and I'll give you my contact information at the end of the webinar here, and I can send you a schedule. I've got to tell you that the counties don't always follow it, and then you can have a delayed reassessment. So it's not a hard and fast schedule, but the counties generally follow it. One other thing that I would like to mention about when they do the reassessment, the value of the property value in the reassessment is not based on the current year or the current time period. Every county has a base year for that reassessment. For example, I'll go back to Charleston County. Their last reassessment was supposed to be in 2009 with a base year of 2008, where they used basically only sales data for 2008. Well, they delayed it a year, and then they delayed it another year. So when they did the reassessment in 2010, it was based on 2008 data. When they do their reassessment next year, if they do it on time, it will be based on 2012 data, or excuse me, 2013 data. Let's go to the next slide here. If I can figure out how to do it. All right. Oops. I'm back to the same one. There we go. Okay. So what the effects are on the consumers or our clients. There are some positive effects. One of reassessment. One is that it creates fairness in tax. If reassessments are done properly, basically everyone, should pay based on about what their property is actually worth. It also provides a basis for valuing property for taxes. Again, your taxes are based on your millage rate times your property value times the percentage, which is determined by the type of property you have. So that is the positive effect of reassessment. Talk a little bit about negative effects of reassessment. Reassessment, in conjunction with Act 388, has had a big negative impact on rental property, commercial property, investment property, second home property. I'll kind of go through each one. If you own rental property, for example, you're paying a much higher tax burden percentage-wise than someone who owns a home. Say maybe you have two identical houses. One is a rental property right next door to someone's permanent residence. In most counties, you'll find that the person whose property is a permanent resident, or it's a permanent residence, will pay less than half of what the renter will pay in property taxes. Now, of course, the renter pays the property taxes through his rent, and he doesn't know, so he doesn't complain and really kick up dirt and cause a lot of problems about it. But the property owner is paying that higher rent. So what it tends to do is it tends to overtax the lower income people who can't afford to buy. It's not always lower income, but the majority of people who are, I guess, less fortunate, who have lower incomes, actually pay a very disproportionate amount of our property taxes. So that is one, and I think that's a huge inequity in the system, and I think that really needs to be changed. Same goes for second homes. Second homes, particularly in resort areas, pay a huge tax burden. Doing a lot of work right now in Beaufort County, and I look at what some of these people pay in taxes, and I've got to say, I wonder why in the world someone would want to own a piece of property in South Carolina and pay anywhere, some of them are paying $10,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year just to have the privilege of owning a home in South Carolina, which is absolutely ridiculous. When Act 388 first passed, those same people were paying much less in property taxes, because what has happened is, because the school boards and the counties know that the primary residents of the state do not pay the school millage portion of the taxes, and what they've done is they've really raised the amount of millage that they're charging to the primary residents. To the non-primary residents in these resort areas. One of the ways they have done this is, prior to Act 388, or right around when it started, they had the ability to float a lot of bonds. And if you drive around and you wonder where all these new schools came from, a lot of that is a result of Act 388. It had a positive impact on building schools. However, the chickens always come home to roost, so to speak, and those bonds have to be paid for. They're not free. That's borrowed money. So the school boards all across the state, and it's true in almost everywhere you go, they all built new schools. They put off paying for them through floating bonds, and now we're seeing the impact on that. If you own commercial property, investment property, second homes, you probably noticed your property taxes have gone way up, and a lot of that is a result of the counties floating those bonds. The other negative effect on consumers of reassessment is the methodology used for determining values for reassessment. And I would argue this, and if there's any appraisers, I'll be glad to talk with you about that. Basically, it's scientifically unsound. When you put a value on something, reassessment or an appraisal only looks one way and can only look one way under current law, and it can only look backwards. It does not have the ability, when you do an appraisal or a mass appraisal for reassessment, to look forward to see where property values are going, where they might be in the future, and there's absolutely no trending. If you ask a statistician, say you went to a college, you went to, say, University of South Carolina, you went to the economics department, and you said, I want to know what a property is worth at a point in time, they would certainly look backwards, but they would also want to forecast and look forward to see where the value is going. Because if you only look backwards, and you only look backwards 1 year, you're not going to be able to really determine what the actual value of the property is, only what it was. When you have a big economic shakeup like we did in 2008, and actually occurred basically in September, where you had property values plummet, when you go and you look at a value of a piece of property, say again, I'm going to go back to Charleston County, and you look at a piece of property and say that property in 2008, the county valued it at $500,000. The next year, if you did a valuation of the property, you'd probably find the value of that, using their methodology, dropped by 20%, or maybe even 30%, seemingly overnight. However, that didn't occur all at once. It occurred over time, and if the scientific methods were used for determining valuation, and the valuation is determined as of December 1st of the base year of the reassessment, if that would have been used, you at least would have seen probably a more accurate prediction of what the property was worth. Now, if you remember, I said earlier that the property's based, the valuation reassessment is based on the base year of the reassessment. That I think that brings me to my next point. I'm going to move here. Is that it creates additional instability and volatility in the real estate market. When somebody is buying a piece of property right now, say on, let's go back to Charleston because of that 2008 real estate value, or selling a piece of property in Charleston, the property taxes that that person pays because of the law that the South Carolina Realtors helped pass, point of sale. When somebody buys that property, that the value of the property, as long as it's what they call a valid sale, which is not a non-bank sale, a sale in the open market, will drop to what they paid for. So that person, say you have two identical houses on Kiowa, and the tax value on them is both $400,000. And say you buy it this year, and you pay $300,000 for it. Your value, because of the changes South Carolina Realtors pushed through for point of sale, or what the assessors call assessable transfer of interest, will drop to $300,000. But the guy next door, who has been living there, who didn't sell his home, will still pay taxes based on a value of $400,000. So that can make a big difference. Whether somebody will want to continue to own a property, and it creates a lot of tax inequity, and inequity creates volatility. I've got another question here, and I want to answer that now. If I understand, all primary and non-primary home owners pay school debt, 6% and 10% pay school operations. Also, taxes are not calculated based on assessed value, not on market value. I'm having a little trouble understanding what the question is, but I guess the point is that because of the way the laws are, that a non-homeowner, instead of paying the 4%, will pay 6%, or on certain types of other property, commercial property, pay 10% towards school operations, whereas the primary homeowner will only pay 4%. In addition to that, the homeowner does not pay any portion of school operations. And the other, I guess, problem in the question is about assessed value, is that the property's taxes are calculated on assessed value, which with the fluctuations we have in the market, and particularly in counties that have not undergone reassessment, can be very different. I mean, what a property's worth and what you're taxed on are not always the same. I'll go to one other point here, is that if say you've got commercial property, and say you've got a Walmart as a tenant, and when you're assessed, they assess the property at, say, $3 million because Walmart is your tenant. Well, the next year Walmart moves out and you still own property. Guess what? You pay taxes on that property as if Walmart's the tenant, for the next 5 years, even though that property is vacant. That's a huge problem. So what you want to do, say you want to appeal the property, and say you have a good reason for appealing the property, and you think, based on current law, you can get the property lowered. Well, instead of, like in some states, the state having to justify the value put on the property, the total burden of proof is on you. You have to prove why your property value is assessed incorrectly. In some cases, because property valuations as realtors, are so subjective and it's not scientific, that you're unable to do that. And so the county assessor basically can just shoot you down. They don't have to give you a reason. They don't have to prove their value, in which case you can do what they call a formal appeal before you go before a board to appeal the value. And I'll talk a little bit of that later. That doesn't always work so well, and I'll talk about the reasons. But the burden of proof to proving what the property value is on you. Another problem with it is the assessors having very little accountability to the taxpayer. I got to tell you, the culture of the county has a big impact on assessors' attitudes. There are certain counties where it's almost impossible or very difficult to appeal and win with an assessor. Lexington County is notorious for, there have been articles in the paper about the assessor there. Charleston County, same thing, very difficult. And in fact, in Charleston County, they've added all these steps to doing it just to get into the process. You know, it is very cumbersome to the point where they even look at it. It takes sometimes over a year. Pickens County, very difficult. Then there are other counties, Greenwood County, Oconee County, Greenville County, which the assessors basically seem to be a little bit more taxpayer friendly and are willing to, do their job and look at the valuation and basically if they deem it is too high, they're pretty reasonable. They'll lower it. So there is a huge discrepancy when it comes to the appeal process from county to county. Let's talk about the types of tax appeals. The easiest one, the best one, is informal tax appeal. Basically, which can be, there's usually, most counties have a little form you fill out. You send the reasons why you think your property is valued incorrectly, and it goes to the assessor. The assessor looks at it and, basically he gives you a yay or a nay. If you don't like their answer, you can go to a formal appeal, which is each county has an appeal board where you take your information, and basically it's like it's adversarial relationship where you go against the assessor and you try to say why your value is correct and he says why his value is correct. Some cases the assessor will present information. Some cases he just try to shoot down what you say. The last and really your best shot in this state for getting relief through reassessment is the administrative law court, which is very fair, and it is a court. You're not required to have an attorney, but most people do hire an attorney, and it gets fairly expensive. In South Carolina, you have to go through all three, or the first two, to get to administrative law court, and anything you submitted, only things that you submitted in the first two would be admissible in the administrative law court. Got another question. How are REO sales treated by the county assessor's offices, especially in cases where there are a large number of comparable REO sales, similar properties in the same subdivision? When and how many do REO sales establish a market for the county assessor? The county assessors typically do not like to use REO sales. They'll typically throw those out. However, in a lot of situations, that's all there are. The best thing that a homeowner can do in that situation is basically argue that with the assessor or with the appeals board that the value in the neighborhood is being set by REO sales. As you get into the formal appeal in the administrative law court, I think that has a little more weight. Typically, the assessors are very reluctant to use those, and you can understand why. Is because generally that would causes them to lower the value. I can't tell you how many times where we've had an REO sale that we know has been on the open market, that we can prove has been on the open market, and the assessor just has flatly refused to even consider it. even though it might the bank might have had it on the market through a realtor for over a year. Not unusual, and that is a big problem, and also goes to the unscientific nature of the appraisal system. That isn't a problem in itself. Rules for appeal. First of all, talk about time frame. In a reassessment year where the county is reassessing, you generally have 60 to 90 days, and it's usually 90 days, from the time you get the notice of the appeal to appeal the value. One thing that you need to know about this is the reassessment and the tax notices usually come out separately. So it's possible to get a reassessment notice and not know that your taxes have gone up in time to actually file an appeal. If they send them out early enough in the year, you may not be able to file an appeal by the time you found your taxes have gone up. Because remember, counties have been changing millage rate because property values have dropped. Who can appeal? Anybody who owns a property can appeal any year. In a reassessment year, you have 90 days from when that notice went out. In most counties, they will let you appeal up until about January 15th of the next year when the taxes are due. If you appeal in that year, it counts toward that year, though. A lot of counties are extremely far behind in getting to appeals. For formal appeals, Beaufort County, for example, is 30 months behind in reviewing people who have made formal appeals to the appeal board. The individual assessors are not that far behind, but the county appeals board is that far behind. How often can you appeal? South Carolina law lets you appeal every year. There's also attorney general. I think there's a court case that an opinion by the attorney general that supports that as well. So you can't appeal every year, but remember it's based on the value during the reassessment. Who can help with an appeal? The taxpayer can submit any information that he wants to about the appeal. Real estate agent can provide information for the appeals, especially the informal appeal, like services. But basically, what you cannot do unless you're an attorney, surprise, surprise, or you cannot represent the client as they're represented in the appeal process. Again, you can provide them with information and help them with it, but you cannot be their representative. A appraiser can provide them with their information and can testify on their behalf, but cannot represent them. I've got another question. I live in a subdivision. Would it help me if all of my neighbors were also to appeal their values? Yeah. One interesting fact is, and this is something that was told to me by Bernie Maybank, a very prominent South Carolina attorney who's helped the South Carolina realtors craft some reforms to current appraisal law, is that you cannot, as a group or as a class, sue the state. So a whole neighborhood going to the assessor can only be done on an individual level. So would that help if everybody appeals their value? It may put some political pressure on the assessor, but it has no legal benefit as far as the appeal goes, unfortunately. I want to cover a couple questions on I want to cover some more questions, and then I want to kind of show you some things about kind of how inequitable the tax system is here at the end. So what I'm going to do here, give me just a second, is I'm going to show you actually an example of a property tax report. This is off the Beaufort County website, and this is just a random person who I picked to show you. This is their primary residence. You can see here on this that this person owns $911,000. All right, you'll notice that what they're paying in property taxes is about $3,300 a year. You'll also notice that since 2003, that has not changed very much. There's a couple years where it's been lower, a couple years it's been higher, but you haven't seen a big change in property tax valuations over that time period. There's a couple reasons for this. One is when Act 388 passed, it set the market value of his property was capped, I think, at somewhere around $500,000. I don't have the exact number because they don't provide it here. So you can see, even though the county says the value of his property is $911,000, they capped his property at about $500,000, and it can only go up 15% or 3% every year as far as reassessment goes. Now I'm going to show you another one here, and pardon me, but I accidentally closed it right before the webinar, and I'm going to have to just type this in again. And this is a non-resident, and I'm going to show you kind of the difference. This is somebody who's got a property that maybe they rent out, or it's a second home. Oops, I typed in the wrong address. Let me go back to it. Again, stay with me here. I think you're going to find this real interesting if I can get it done. Let's just try 9-deck. I'm not coming up with anything. Okay. A little silence there. Oh, I'm typing the wrong thing. No wonder I'm not coming up with it. I promise this is worth the wait. Okay, 9-deck Hawk Road. All right, this is a non-primary residence. Currently, the market value of the property is $2,476,000. This person's property is also capped, and it's probably capped at around $2 million because property is $2 million for a rate. But look at their property taxes, what they're paying. They're paying percentage-wise over double what the individual resident is paying. Furthermore, you can see, look at the difference, the increase in value the county's put. They've almost tripled the value since 2003. This is typical about how counties treat individuals, taxpayers who are non-residents or who have second home properties. This is a big problem with the current tax law right now. I need to clarify a point. I've got a question here. During reassessment, your tax value can only increase 15% over the last reassessment, or 3% every year. It doesn't go up every year. It only can be changed every 5 years. But the way the law is written, it's 3% per year. What it comes out to is 15%. Because 5 years times 3% is 15. I hope that makes sense. So when you get your properties reassessed, your value cannot increase. Your assessed value cannot increase more than 15%. One other thing I want to talk about is cap value versus the market value the county's put on it. The cap value is a nice thing that came in Act 388, which basically says that they set a value um, your property has a set value, and the counties cannot increase that value basically more than 3% per year when they reassess, or for a total of 15%. And so the county may say your property's worth more, they'll put a market value on it, but you're taxed on the actual cap value of the property. So basically, and to summarize here, in what I wanted to show you with that last example is the tax system and the reassessment system in South Carolina is very unfair. It needs to be changed. Realtors need to be allowed to have more input into this. Your RPAC dollars are very well used here. It's one of our top issues, if not the top issue that we deal with. That, and probably the ability to fill in contracts. But in South Carolina, this unequal tax system has created a big disincentive, and I hear this again and again, day after day, from people. I'll never buy property in South Carolina because this person here paying $20,000 in property taxes knows that the guy who lives in the house next door to him is probably paying about $7,000. And people don't always mind paying taxes, but they do not, and they very much object to being treated unfairly. If we do not change the tax over the long term, it will cost South Carolina billions of dollars in tax revenue, because property values will not increase, because demand will continue to decrease for resort properties. People will not invest in rental property and things like that because they're getting over taxes. Taxes, what can you do? Right now, if I've got anybody from Charleston County, you've got a big opportunity right now. The Charleston County Assessor's Office is planning on, and they have told people this over the phone, they've told me, they've told other clients of mine, that they plan on putting off reassessment for another year. This has not been voted. It was supposed to be in 2014. It has not been voted on county council. County council has not agreed to delay reassessment. But the county assessor's office is planning on doing it. Get on the phone, talk to your county council members, and ask them why the assessor's office is telling people this. If you don't believe me, just watch it happen if nobody does anything. By putting off reassessment, people who are likely to invest money to buy second homes, additional rental property, will not do it because they know they're being overtaxed. If they can get a little bit of tax relief, if it can be equalized out more equitably based on current property values, they're a lot more likely, to buy property or invest in property in Charleston County. The rest of the state, you need to talk to your state representatives, your state senators, and talk about kind of the problems that we've outlined today. It's critical that we get change. If we don't get change, it's going to affect your pocketbook and it's going to affect our overall economy. That pretty much concludes my webinar, unless I have any other questions. Presenter, do we have any other questions? I thank everybody for joining me today, and this concludes the webinar.